Hey there, Smite fans, and welcome back to another prediction video. This week, we are covering Super Regionals. So, they released the schedule, we know what's happening, we know who's playing and when, and we know that it is happening this Wednesday starting at 1 p.m. and the first set of the week is going to be great. It's going to be Orbit versus Obey. This is going to be a really hot set. I feel like Obey has a lot of potential here. They're this team so far that we've seen that has a lot of skill, and they have a lot of potential. And they've been able to push themselves to the point where they're actually contending, for the most part, for third and fourth place almost consistently. The problem is that they're only vying for third and fourth place. They haven't been a strong enough team so far to really cause an upset over Orbit or over NRG, and those are the two teams that I really feel are dominating Europe right now. And as you can see on the bracket, they're both going to be showing up showing up this week. And Orbit here is going to have not necessarily an easy time with Obey, but I feel like they're going to be able to handle them relatively calmly. Orbit not really going to have to handle too much from Obey. Like, I feel like Obey is definitely going to be able to take a game off of Orbit. I feel like they're strong enough to do that, and I think they're a strong enough team to even make the other games that will happen in the set come very, very, very close. The problem is that they just don't have the skill from what I have seen to say that, yes, they are going to be able to take the set, and because of that, I'm going to give it to Orbit, and I'm going to say it's going to be a 3-1. Orbit's going to be able to qualify for Worlds. The second match that we'll be seeing on Wednesday will be Team Eager versus Flashpoint Esports. For those that don't know, Flashpoint Esports was formerly Denial sold the team to Flashpoint Esports. I will maybe go into details on that at some other point in time, but as for right now, that's all you really need to know is that their sponsorship has changed, and this is going to be probably the set to watch on Wednesday. I think Orbit and Obey are going to be very close, but I think that Eager and Flashpoint are going to be even closer. I feel like this is the dream set. Both of these teams have been pretty much vying for that spot. They want to go to Worlds. They have this burning passion, and we look at it. Eager, you can almost guarantee these guys have been busting their asses off, and the same thing goes for Flashpoint. Both of these teams will have been scrimming as much as they can against everybody that they are able to that will give them anything to learn, and trying to widen their god pools. And I feel like that's actually going to be a big part of this, is the picks and bans for these 3-5 games probably, let's be real. Those are going to be what kind of determines everything. Because if you ban out someone's god pool, that gives your team, obviously, the biggest advantage you can have. They're playing something they're uncomfortable with, you can pick on that. Both of these teams have a relatively wide god pool across all of their members. I feel like the solo lane is where we're going to be seeing Divios shine out from Eager. The same thing kind of goes, I expect to see Zapman pull something interesting, and the same thing goes for DJ Bernicus as well. All of them have a really versatile kit, and based on what we saw at the group LAN, I just don't feel like we're going to be able to see Flashpoint Esports take 3 games. I think they have the skill, I think they have the determination to take 2, but ultimately I think Eager has something up their sleeve. I think they're going to be coming out. This is going to be a 3-2, but Eager is going to find themselves finally qualified for Worlds. Going into the next day, we will be having NRG versus Sanguine. Now, this one is going to be a little bit different. In fact, once you see my scores for this, I have them written down in front of me. You're going to kind of question me for a little bit, but I'm going to explain why first so that it makes a little bit more sense. NRG is obviously one of the most dominant teams we have seen in Smite in a long time. They're the last world champions. They pretty much dominated every single tournament that they've encountered. And because of that, I'm going to have to say that obviously they're going to be able to win this set. I don't think a lot of people disagree with that. Sanguine, they have an opportunity here, but I just don't feel like that team as a whole is going to be able to pull this off. They're definitely a stronger team than I've ever given them credit for, but I just don't feel like they're going to be able to pull out the same kind of thing twice. I don't think they're going to be able to push themselves far enough to beat NRG of all people. I think they might have the potential to find themselves somewhere in the round robin stage later on, but as it stands right now, I feel like this one's definitely in favor of NRG. I'm going to be giving it to them in a 3-1. I think Sanguine is strong enough to take a game. We've seen it happen before and will happen again, more than likely, just because I feel like, because NRG just isn't the same kind of titan it was before. Other teams are starting to catch up. I feel like Sanguine will have been busting down to try and get to the point where they can finally do something. Because of that, I know NRG is going to be pulling out some crazy strats. I know they're going to be pulling out their strengths, every single thing that they know. Their LAN is going to be insane. They're going to be able to take it, but I think that Sanguine will be able to give them a little bit of a slip up and push this to a 3-1. And the second set of that day will be Soar Gaming versus Luminosity Gaming. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, this one's the hardest one to predict of all of them. North America is overall harder than Europe right now, just because Orbit and NRG are so very distinctly better than the other teams. It's a close third. Obey is sitting there very, very close. Dignitas even is sitting there very, very close, but they're just not quite at that same skill level. Whereas in North America, you could pretty much throw any kind of score onto the left side of this bracket right now, and I would be able to say, yeah, that makes sense. Unless it was something that was outside of a best of 5, but you say 3-1 in Flashpoint. I mean, yeah, okay, I could see it happening. 3-1 Eager, 3-0 Eager. It's like, well, 3-0 is a little bit too hasty, but for the most part, these teams are very, very close in skill. And Soar Gaming versus Luminosity, this one is probably going to be the closest we're going to see out of the semifinals. Now, a lot of people would look at this and just say Soar has been relatively dominant compared to Luminosity. Soar, out of these two teams, is the one that plays probably the most consistently across the board. They typically win in the same kind of fashion as they lose. They are very stable. Luminosity is a little bit more volatile, but they also have some really great players in their roles all across the board, so it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle it. I feel like Luminosity at this point has been practicing their ass off. I feel like they have been pushing themselves to the point where they will be able to find themselves vying for another spot at Worlds, and of course for Barracuda and Jeff Hindla, this would be their trip back to Worlds once again. But I just don't think they're going to have what it takes. Now, you could tell me right now if you think this is 3-2 in favor of Luminosity, that's perfectly fine. Honestly, it could go either way. Whichever one of these teams gets knocked out, I feel is going to go to Worlds anyway because they're both very, very strong. I personally feel like Soar is going to be the one that pulls ahead here, but it could very well be Luminosity. It really is up in the air. This one, I'm leaning towards Soar just because I feel like they've shown a little bit more consistency throughout their split, but Luminosity definitely has the exact same chance. Now on the next day, that will bring us down to the round robin stage. So this is the group play. So there are 6 teams, the 4 that got knocked out in the semifinal games and that I have predicted here. So that will be Obey Alliance, Sanguine Esports, Luminosity Gaming, and Flashpoint Esports. And they will be going up against the 2 gauntlet winners, which are Team Dignitas and Allegiance. Now, the way this one's going to work out is that each team is going to play each other once. It's a best of 1, and the 2 teams with the top scores are going to go to Worlds. That means a lot. That means there's no chance to try something new. There's no chance to say maybe we need to redo our comp. Picks and bans, that's all you get. That game, that's all you get. These teams are going to be fighting, and because it's only a best of 1, I feel like that shifts the favor of the teams. If it was going longer than that, some of these teams are very, very good at adapting, very good at changing up their strategies to match whatever you're trying to do. Those teams mainly seem to be Allegiance and Dignitas. We also see that with some of these other teams, but a lot of these other teams have very good single game fights, and that's where I think we're going to be seeing Luminosity and Flashpoint come out on top. Now, when I was narrowing this down earlier, I was thinking, who the hell is going to come out of this? Because these 6 teams, you look at it, the 2 that I can knock off, I don't feel like Sanguine's going to be able to climb their way out of it. It's possible, but I just don't see it happening. And the same thing kind of goes for Dignitas. Dignitas has a little bit more possibility of doing it than Sanguine, but for the most part, the 4 teams you're going to be looking at are Obey, Allegiance, Flashpoint, and Luminosity. Now, Obey has had to deal with some titans in their region. Obviously, Orbit and NRG are very, very strong. And I feel like that's going to help them a little bit when it comes down to fighting up against the North American teams here, but I feel like ultimately they're just not going to be able to handle it. I'd like for them to prove me wrong, but the last few times we've seen them play against North American teams, and honestly, the last few times we've seen them play, they just haven't been as strong a team as they once were. They're starting to falter just a little bit more than I feel like they should, and it's bringing them down to the point where they're now probably not going to be able to make it to Worlds, which really limits it down to the 3 teams that I'm honestly very confused about. Flashpoint is obviously an incredibly strong team, but sometimes they have some team synergy issues. It's kind of apparent in their play. Every time now and then you see them, you can tell there are conflicting calls or people maybe second-guessing what's going on. For the most part, they play very, very well, though, and that's kind of why I'm leaning towards them, especially in a one-game scenario. This is a team that is very, very strong for that kind of scenario. Allegiance, I feel like they have an opportunity. And the reason I think that is just because with the new roster, they're able to kind of shift things up. They're a lot stronger than they were. That being said, having a new roster at this point in the game, I think they're still going to have some issues kind of with their synergy overall, and I feel like if it had been maybe another gauntlet and they had to fight through that, that'd be no problem. Having to fight through Flashpoint and having to fight through Luminosity is just not going to work well for them here. I feel like those two teams are just a little bit too veteran to be able to topple to something like this roster, and while I think of the Allegiance roster definitely needs to hold themselves together, next season they're going to be killing it. For this season, I feel like they're going to get knocked out here, and that's honestly the only reason I feel like Luminosity and Flashpoint are going to make it. I feel like you could change Luminosity with Allegiance if you really wanted to. I honestly think those two teams are very close here, but I know for a fact Flashpoint with this kind of setup is definitely going to shine bright, and that will find them in a spot to Worlds, and I feel like Luminosity is going to be the other one who's going to be able to take that. That brings us to, I want to say the least important games, but I don't really want to say that just because they're still going to be great, because these are the finals. These are the teams we're going to be seeing fighting at Worlds anyway, so this is going to be very interesting. And this is also for seeding when it comes to the World Championship. So as it stands right now, we have Luminosity confirmed, Flashpoint confirmed, more than likely Eager, Soar, Orbit, NRG. Those are the 6 teams I think are going to be coming out of Super Regionals into the World Championship. Now the question really is, who's going to get top seed in North America, who's going to get top seed in Europe? And honestly, I feel like both of these sets are going to go to 5. The first one up will be the finals for Europe. It's going to be Orbit versus NRG. And this is another one a lot like Soar versus Luminosity, but I feel like pumped up to 11. This one's going to be very close. This one could honestly go either way. I can't believe I'm saying that because last year I would have said this the other way, but it was at Super Regionals last year that the same Orbit roster toppled this same NRG roster in a best-of-5 finals. So knowing that that happened then, it is possible to happen again this time. I'm still going to lean in favor of NRG, but it's definitely going to be 5 games. NRG is going to have some very, very close calls. The last game has tons of potential to go either way, but I feel like NRG ultimately going to be able to push that one and find a 3-2 victory over Orbit. And the finals for North America, it's going to be Eager versus Soar, and much like Europe, I feel like either team has some chance. Again, this one actually depends more on what we see out of the semifinals. Eager, again, they might have something up their sleeve. I'm just assuming based on what we saw at the LAN play, they're holding on to something. They have a strat in their mind that they haven't been able to use yet, and that's exactly what I expect to see coming out here in the semifinals and finals. I think Soar is going to be able to take 2 games. Honestly, I feel like that's a little bit generous. I think they might only be able to take 1 game. But every time I do that, I always end up kind of miscalculating. They always take another game, and one of them ends up being more of a stompy kind of game. So I'm going to go ahead and err in favor of them getting them 2 games. But ultimately, I think Eager is going to come out as first seed from North America with the 3-2 victory here in the finals. And I feel like that's going to be leading up for some really great potential. Now, of course, the finals are very important because they lay out some of the bracket for Worlds. I don't think any of the teams know what the bracket for Worlds will be like yet. So there is some potential of maybe playing the bracket if they figure that out. If it's announced before the finals, they might know, maybe we don't want to be there. Maybe we want to, do our best, but maybe not push too hard. Maybe try an old strat that people know how to handle with, because at that point, we can play the bracket, fall somewhere a little bit easier for us to get towards the finals or the semifinals and Worlds. It's possible that that's going to happen, but I really doubt it. So far, we haven't seen any bracket from Worlds. I feel like they know that that's something that could happen, so neither the admins nor the teams really want that to be the case. They want to go ahead and play some of the best Smite games that we're going to see. And honestly, I think every single game this week is going to be amazing. I absolutely think that we are not going to have a dull match. There may be one in Orbit versus Obey, but I think every other one of these is going to be a very strong fight. The team's playing very close. And there might not be a lot of action, but you will watch and see the mechanics going through these players' heads. It's going to be very fun to watch. Hopefully you will be able to watch it as well. I will be hanging around in the chat as much as I can. I have a lot of work to do this week, but I'm probably going to ignore a lot of it just to be able to watch these, because these are going to be some games that you don't want to miss. So for the most part, thank you guys for watching. If you disagree, go ahead and tell me why. I'm going to be able to make up, I'm going to throw this bracket up online tomorrow. Actually, I'm going to be putting it up on my Twitter, which if you don't follow me, go ahead and throw me a follow at Goremizer. It's a link in the description. I think there might be something popping up occasionally if I decide to put that on there. Thank you so much for watching. If you disagree, hit me up on Twitter, comment down below, do something, tell me what am I thinking wrong, call me out in the chat. I'll be hanging around in maybe a couple Smite chats that are possibly restreaming the stream, just because I like to hear some other opinions as well as the original opinion of the casters. So it's going to be really fun. I recommend you do not miss these as much as possible. I know starting at 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, it's kind of hard to watch. A lot of people are at work or at school. I personally am going to have classes overlapping with that, so it's going to be hard for me to watch some of the games, but I'm still going to try to stay as caught up as possible. Thank you guys for watching, and I will talk to you in the next prediction video, which will probably be something very similar to this one, but with the bracket for Worlds.